Okay, take two. So I actually figured out why we need to start raising money for this podcast. I got my first kind of, I don't want to call it legitimate reason, but motivating reason. And that is because to get down here tonight, the only way I could convince Cammie to record a podcast was if I promised her a cigar.
True story.
Which these things aren't cheap. I think these little guys are like $3 or $4. So, trying to light a cigar right now while, what is this called? Podcasting? So, maybe I'll play the intro right now. Oh, wait a minute.
You're listening to the Fight for Together podcast.
Yeah, I just was not, I was pretty burned out today. Dealing with comments on Instagram and 2-year-olds. So I definitely wasn't feeling it, but I feel okay now.
I know. I knew. Once you got started, you'd be glad. Just like other things in our life. Wink, wink. Nod, nod. Double orgasm. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, the cigar helps too. Just like promises of back rubs before sex help.
I wasn't talking about back rubs. I was talking about this afternoon where...
I know.
Okay.
I know.
Every time you fight me, you're like, I don't want to do it. And I'm like, just give me a minute.
I told Ben that because we've been trying to figure out why I do that. And I told him, I think it's because it takes so much energy to even just say yes to sex. But once I do, the rest takes care of itself.
But this podcast is not about sex.
No. No, it's not.
This one is about this documentary that we just saw in the theater tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to share this backstory a little bit because I saw... So first of all, I was into rock climbing at one stage of my life. And actually, we all were kind of. Like you did it. Kids did it.
Yeah, a little bit.
And I heard about this documentary like over the summer, and I was down in Nashville, and I saw it there in the theater, and I just like loved it. Like I still can't exactly figure out why.
Which is really big whenever Ben loves a movie in the theater, because I think it's not an exaggeration that he only loves one movie a year in the theater, if that.
And this was it.
Like maybe one every 3 years, but yeah. So I was like, oh, wow, it's that good.
And I really thought you'd like it. And actually, we got in, I don't want to call it a fight. It wasn't that, because that's too dramatic. But it was like, I was like, oh, I want to take you. And then you're like, what did you say? You're like, I don't want to go.
I'm not interested or something like that.
And I was like, you don't even know what it's about. Hang on, I'm trying to fix this camera.
Yeah.
So I was kind of bummed out, but you gave it a shot. So
Yeah.
So basically, this was the game plan. We all went out to the theater tonight, and I invited some other friends. My parents came, and there was like, it's one of those movies. It's called Free Solo. Did I say that already? Where it's like National Geographic, and it's like indie type small film. Maybe not indie, but small budget. So it's only playing in certain theaters. So you had to like drive to see it. And we all went, and I told the kids I want you to all bring notebooks. So that we can talk about like it afterwards, and I want you to take notes on things that stand out to you. I think your microphone's supposed to be this way. Sorry, we have these like technical difficulties today. So that's what we did. We all went inside as a family, and it was like, I don't know, $60. But, and then we had this kind of cool discussion afterwards. So I wanted to share like why I was excited about it, what we talked about as a family. But before we do that, I thought we'll give you kind of like the audio version of the trailer. So you'll have to picture like this guy on this like huge vertical rock wall in Yosemite called El Capitan. That's like the stunning visual photography that's happening during this trailer. And it's like, as you'll see, it's very suspenseful. And I'll show you a little visual here for those that are watching on video.
Does it feel different to be up there without a rope?
It's obviously like much higher consequence.
People who know a little bit about climbing are like, oh, he's totally safe. And then people who really know exactly what he's doing are freaked out.
I've thought about El Cap like for years, and every year I'm like, that's really scary. I'll never be content unless I at least put in the effort. El Cap is the most impressive wall on Earth.
It's 3,200 feet of sheer granite. It's the center of the rock climbing universe.
Obviously I get interview questions about it all the time. Oh, would you like to do that? You're like, yes, for sure.
So you have a girlfriend now, I heard.
It was awesome. Pretty much makes life better in every way.
It's really hard for me to grasp why he wants this. But if he doesn't do this stuff, he'd regret it.
Everybody who has made free soloing a big part of their life is dead now.
I haven't been injured in like 7 years. I suddenly start getting injured all the time.
What if something happens? What if I don't see him again?
I could just walk away, but it's like, I don't want to.
I've always been conflicted about shooting a film about free soloing just because it's so dangerous. It's hard to not imagine your friend falling through the frame to his death.
I think when he's free soloing, that's when he feels the most alive, most everything. How can you even think about taking it away from somebody?
No mistakes tomorrow.
It's starting to get kind of sight.
If you're pushing the edge, eventually you find the edge.
Sorry, this is kind of long.
You guys actually can watch.
Hey, Jimmy, do you copy? Just started climbing.
Breathing heavy. Okay, sorry, that was kind of long, I realized, without having the video. But for those of you who, I don't even know if it said this, they use the term free soloing. So what this documentary is about is basically the tallest wall, I think, in the world. El Capitan in Yosemite, Northern California, is about 3,000 feet high. And it's like 26 pitches, which means that if you're climbing with a roped partner, it's like 26 lengths of rope, give or take, somewhere around there. So this guy named Alex Hannold did the entire thing by himself with no rope. So you see these, I mean, basically, this is what my mom had to say about it. What'd you think about it, Mom?
Oh, this is beautiful. It's so scary, but it's a beautiful place.
That pretty much sums it up.
It was very scary. So I've never had my palms sweat. Like, there's these certain YouTube videos that I watch, those guys climbing on the tall buildings, and that makes my palms sweat.
Mm-hmm.
But when I first watched it, not so much today, but when I watched it the first time, my palms sweat for like an hour and a half. That's exaggerating. Like, probably the last 45 minutes.
Yeah, when he's
But I was on the edge of
flying.
my seat for an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
this document or this podcast is going to be spoiler free. We're not going to tell you what happens at the ending. And we also want to. This isn't really just about rock climbing, because what was so fascinating to me, there's this feat. You know, this guy's doing this crazy thing where basically there's so many times throughout the documentary where his entire life is resting on like a 1/16 of an inch of his shoe, or like 2 fingers
Yeah.
You know,
it's crazy.
Like half of his thumb is holding his body up from falling 3,000 feet or 2,000 feet. So it gets into like his psyche and why someone would do this, or is this guy reckless or crazy, or is he have a death wish, or so it's really fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So these are like just some of the things that stood out to me. In the very beginning, like the first minute of the film, Alex says this one line, and it's like kind of in the background, and he says, I feel like anyone can die on any particular day, but free soloing makes it feel more acute or more like imminent or immediate. I forget the exact phrase, but something like that. So he's like, you know, anyone can die, but when you're up there, you like really, really know you can die. What? Why is that there? Hang on. Someone moved my things. Listen, if I'm going to give you the cigar for you to come down here and podcast, you got to say crap. You can't just like smoke.
Okay. Well, I liked the film. I thought it was really well done. I really... what did I say?
Wait, were you listening? This is like such a conversation. So I said this thing, and then you could like build on it, or are you just like starting the podcast over?
I'm not starting it over, but I don't know how to build on it.
Oh.
Like, I don't know if I have anything to say about it.
Oh.
Sorry.
Were you listening?
Not sorry. Yes, I was listening.
What'd I say?
That what he does makes death more like in your face.
Right, you're listening.
Yeah. I agree with that. So I think it's like controversial to people because, I mean, I think the best case example is like driving a car. I mean, I think driving a car is like super dangerous in a way. But I don't know. I mean, I had a really hard time watching him climbing. And I kind of like, if he was my boyfriend, I'd be like, fuck that shit. Like, I don't know. Like maybe I would be able to.
Why?
Because I couldn't handle it. Not because he shouldn't do it.
What if you didn't watch?
Then I was kind of feeling for her because so his girlfriend, even if I didn't watch, she didn't watch, but she has to go away and think I may never see him again. And I've even had those feelings with you when you've climbed Mount Rainier.
But his whole point was anyone could die at any time. And you just said that, like on the freeway.
Yeah, but that kind of stuff messes with your head more than like driving. Although I did think about that with you and Dove.
Holy crap.
Because Dove was driving
for the first time on the freeway.
For hours, yeah. So I thought about that, but I don't...
I actually thought when she was driving, I was like, I could die. I mean, like before she even started. And then there was a few times when she was actually driving when I was like, oh, we could have... You want to be on the podcast? That's Dove.
Yeah.
Screaming from the upstairs. We're in the basement.
But normally I don't think about the car being like you're going to die.
Okay, so I just want to talk about that for a second because I think that's really important. Because just because we don't think about it doesn't make it less real.
Yeah.
And driving is normal. It's
I just think it would take this emotional toll. Maybe you would get used to it. Like, I don't know.
So this guy, he's done like 1,000 of these. He's done 1,000 free solo climbs. So he said this line. He said, the consequence is high, but the risk is low. So mathematically, he's like, okay. But if he, like one fuck up or one nap or slip up or whatever, and he's dead.
Or like a bird flies in his face.
And I just want to say this fact because I think we ignore this. When you are on the freeway going above 50 miles an hour, you are always 1/2 of 1 second away from dying.
Yep.
That's a fact. And you might not. You might survive. And it doesn't happen very often. But you are so close to death.
Yeah.
And for some reason, like...
But it's normal. So that's why no one ever thinks about it.
Yeah, and then if someone dies on a freeway, no one says, like...
They shouldn't have been driving on the freeway.
That idiot shouldn't have been going above 50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Because everyone does it.
Right.
And maybe they're going to McDonald's. Maybe they're going to Chuck E. Cheese. It's not like you have to. You don't even have to, like, go to work. You could, like, walk if you really cared. But because it's normal, no one is like, oh, that idiot. Of course.
Yeah.
That's what you get when you drive above 50 miles an hour.
Right. Because everyone does it.
Of course, the Amish probably think that about us. They're like, those idiots. Of course they're dying.
Yeah.
So he had a different perspective. Like, he was just like... He was like, yeah. He never denied that it was dangerous. He was like, yeah, I could die. He was very upfront about that.
Yeah.
But he was like, anyone can die.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, though. I didn't know how he could do that without just, like, freaking out. I don't know. Like, I would freak out, so...
So this kind of brings me to another of my favorite parts of the documentary where, and feel free to interrupt, but now you're mostly here to smoke.
Whatever.
Is his girlfriend is saying, they get in this like little, like, not a tiff, but she's like trying to get him to acknowledge her existence before he leaves on this epic thing. And she's like, don't I make a difference?
Or, like, she used the word compromise. Don't you think there should be a compromise in a relationship?
And he said no. And his logic, he said, I don't believe that it's my responsibility to maximize my lifespan.
Yeah.
Which is really fascinating line. So we talked about this with the kids, and they were like, well, what does maximize lifespan mean? And we were like, well, it means live as long as possible.
Right.
You know? And while most people don't phrase it that bluntly, I think a lot of the decisions we make, especially parenting decisions, reflect that goal. And, like, just for as an example, when we went on the Appalachian Trail, a lot of people, I mean, there was a ton of encouragement, but there's also a lot of people that were like, that's dangerous. Which is a really weird thing to say because, in a way, it's the most healthiest thing you could ever do is commit yourself to walking every day, almost all day for 5 straight months. Like, there's nothing more healthy.
Yeah. But I think people were saying if your kid died on the Appalachian Trail versus your kid died at home, that would be worse. Like, because you could have prevented that. But they wouldn't maybe say the same thing if your kid was at home. It probably depends on the circumstances, but which is almost similar to, you know, what's going on with him and driving, like solo climbing and driving.
Well, so while most people don't say my goal for myself or my children is to maximize our lifespan.
Yeah.
We do believe and say these things like safety first. Everyone says that and practices that. And one of the biggest critiques all over the place on our hike, I mean, you name it, from filtering water to taking a baby to going in the snow to going in the rain to antibiotics or whatever, was that's not safe. And I think what they were saying was your actions are not putting safety first, or they're not prioritizing having the maximum.
And it's a particular kind of safety too. Like, it's even harder to define what safety really is in our culture because it's so social. Like, it's social safety. It's like what makes you not feel like a shitty parent in everyone else's eyes.
Yeah, where do we were just listening, is that podcast with Tucker Max, I think, and James Altucher, where he said that the American healthcare system, which is notoriously dangerous, it's like one of the worst. It's like the worst first world country systems in the world. And in fact, it's like very dangerous if you look at just like the stats. but people will swear by it and commit to it and go to it because it's become a status symbol.
It's what everyone does.
It's actually not about safety. It's about status.
Yeah.
So if you are not in it, you're an idiot. But it has nothing to do with the actual facts. It has to do with herd mentality.
Or quality.
Yeah. Or actual legitimate safety.
Yeah.
Like, going to hospitals does not make you more safe most of the time.
But it fulfills people's values, which is a certain brand of safety or looking safe. And a status thing.
Because like I said, what was ironic about us going on the Appalachian Trails, I'm convinced for our personal health, there's nothing better you can do than really exercise consistently or walk, and eat well. And sleep well.
And mental health.
And mental health.
Yeah.
So here we are doing really one of the healthiest things we've ever done in our entire life, and people are melting down about it. And I know why. I'm not trying to make it sound like they're super rational, but I think it's just...
It's interesting.
It's ironic.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to this line about maximizing lifespan, because safety first, I think, is a huge lie. And I think it really...
It robs people.
It robs people of what really should be first. So there's a couple ways of looking at this. One phrase I like to use is safety is a tool, not a goal. So when you say safety first, when you live safety first, in other words, when you're like thinking about an adventure, and the first question you ask is there a risk involved? And if you're like, yeah, there's risk, then I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Then you're prioritizing safety. And I think you're putting the cart before the horse. And the reason why I think this is at no one's funeral do you hear like people saying, oh, he was so cool. He was like so safe.
Mm-hmm.
Or people saying, oh man, I'm so glad Bob was here. He did such a good job living to be 87 instead of 86. Like, it's not really a long life or a safe life that anyone ever values, ever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it really is. So you could take the inverse of it, and that's, I think, why people get there is like, no one likes it when someone dies when they're 25. Like, that's not being a hero necessarily, but either is just living long either.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do applaud, though, is a life well lived.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever years you had on this planet, whether it's 10 or 2 or 20 or 80 or 150,
mm-hmm.
like what the things people talk about are courage, loyalty, honesty,
passion,
these types of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the way to deal with this as an individual and as parents is to ask, does this fit my primary values, like those things,
mm-hmm.
whatever this goal is, which for Alex Hannold was climbing a wall.
Yeah.
And then he had to ask, what's the safest way I can do that?
Yeah.
The first question is not, is it safe?
Yeah. I don't think he was looking at everyone else's opinions of what he was doing.
Dude, he was so socially dense.
But I think it served him well in some ways because he was able to he had this internal compass where he just went for what he was the most passionate, what gave him the most life, at least, while he's still living.
It seemed like he almost had like Asperger's.
Maybe.
His dad did, but he could have just been the product of growing up with a dad. But he was emotionally stunted. You could see that, but he had a lot of other things going for him that I actually envied. I loved it.
That he didn't care. He didn't care about what people thought.
He was such a fascinating character, and I think this documentary was as much about him and his personality than it was about climbing. He reminded me of myself.
Yeah.
Like his volume, the volume of other people speaking into his life
turned way down. Like almost like you had to shout, and even then.
I mean, there's just these scenes. The scene, it was a little more fun watching it in Nashville because it was a crowded theater.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like preparing this ghetto meal in his ghetto van.
Yeah.
And the guy makes like as much money as, he said, a medium average dentist.
Right.
So he's
somewhat
wealthy.
Successful. Yeah.
Dentist. And he's like eating out of the spatula. Like he's using the spatula instead of a fork. And I know that because I would do that too.
Yeah.
Where he's like, why would you get a fork dirty? Because then you have to wash the fork.
Yeah.
and it's just more efficient.
Yeah.
It's like pissing in the sink sometimes. It's like,
wait, you do that?
You know I do that.
I'm kidding. Well,
what's that? So, so I really liked that whole just dialogue about maximizing lifespan, because he just said it's not my responsibility. And if you think it is your responsibility, if you feel like a shitty human or parent if you don't maximize your kid's lifespan, I think that's you're bearing a burden and trying to achieve a goal that we were never meant to achieve, which is why I think a lot of the Western medicine is based around, it capitalizes off of that. So there's all these drugs and methods that can postpone your death by a week or a month, but they don't increase your quality of life, and they don't actually increase your actual health. That was like, you remember Patch Adams? Like, I love that movie because he was like really coming down against the medical system, because he was saying it's not just about delaying death, it's about promoting life, and those are actually two separate things.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm blowing her away over here.
Yeah, you are.
Okay, the next thing I had written down, and I don't mind taking the burden for starting the conversation, because you can just...
Hey, I think I'm doing pretty good.
His girlfriend, right before he leaves to go on this thing, like, climb the wall, she says, like, to the camera, and she's driving away, she's like, what if that was our last hug? And she said, I shouldn't even be having these thoughts about him dying. Like, she felt guilty, I think.
She felt guilty. Oh, okay.
Well, I couldn't really tell. I think she
I
felt
couldn't tell. Or,
like, almost like she thought she was jinxing him, or like she shouldn't have to go through that.
Yeah. Okay.
But she was like, what if this is the last time we ever hug? And she didn't like asking that question.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like, and this is something that I made a video and interviewed my aunts and uncles about my grandpa a while back. And one of the things that they said about him that I really appreciated. Oh, I need to redo my camera here. One of the things they said about him was that, like, when he died, it wasn't a surprise for anyone because he'd been talking about it for 70 years.
Yeah.
Like, death was not something to be afraid of. It was actually something to, I don't want to say embrace, but...
Yeah, so we don't talk about death much in our culture, and we hide it. And I think it then, therefore, makes it an even scarier process than maybe it is. Because I've struggled with being afraid of death, and I think, like, most Americans probably do. And I bet it's from this, like, not talking about it thing, you know? Like, it becomes scary because you don't talk about it and you don't see it. Or when you do see it, it's, like, all weird and shrouded.
Yeah, and I feel like living in a powerful country, we feel like we've almost beaten it in a way.
Yeah.
But we've really... I mean, I always think about this analogy. When we flush the toilet, our shit goes away and we never see it. And it's just like, it's almost like it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's like you push a button and it's like, bye-bye.
Yeah.
And it's like, you almost have to never smell it, see it, acknowledge it. Whereas in other countries...
Or if you hike the Appalachian Trail.
Or if you hike the Appalachian Trail, you shit and you have a pile there.
And you're like,
it could
oh,
be a
dang.
pile that's like years old. Well, yeah, when you're these like...
Well, you're just privies. Like, dang. Yeah, you're like, oh, I made that, and it's going to stay there.
Well, and you're always forced to deal with that reality.
Yeah.
And I feel like we treat death the same way. Like, people die or get old, and they just get, like, whisked away. Like, they're in nursing homes.
Yeah, and your mom had that good point where we try to make we try to make death look pretty by, like, embalming people.
And, like, they dress them up and put all this makeup on. Even
they try to make them look like they're still alive as much as possible. When it's like, and your mom and his mom was a hospice nurse for, 15, 20 years probably. And she said, like, death isn't pretty. You know, just isn't. I mean, I guess you could maybe see beautiful things in it, but the point is, it's hard to look at. But we try in our culture. We try
which
to
sounds rosy,
flower it up.
You know, it feels like, oh, well, let's focus on the positive,
right?
But I think it leaves us hanging because I think there's a lot to be understood in death.
Yeah,
and I feel like if we're going to be training our kids well in how to address reality in this life, or whatever religious beliefs or just happiness, we have to acknowledge and deal with this thing.
Yeah.
And even, like, I don't want to get all quotey here on Bible verses, but one of my favorite verses is from Ecclesiastes 7, and it says, "It's better to go into a house of mourning than a house of laughter." Mourning, M-O-U-R, like crying. Because death is the destiny of every man, and the living should take this to heart. So everyone's going to die. So if you know that, it's going to change the way you live. And if you pretend like we're invincible, we're never going to die, you're not. It's going to change the way you live too.
Yeah.
And I don't know, YOLO.
Yeah.
So where were we? So I want, you know, my kids to know. In fact, I think about this quite often, like on the Appalachian Trail or other adventures we've done in the past. I want to be in touch with death. In fact, that was like one of my favorite things. The first time I went on a summit attempt on Mount Rainier, I think it was 2007 or something. I climbed above cloudline. I was on the glacier, pitch black, crazy ass windy. I mean, like horizontal ice. I felt like I could get blown off this mountain. I feel like I was hiking on like a 45-degree incline. It was just like, and I remember feeling like I could die. And you know what? It felt really good. Like it made things feel real. I mean, at this time I was like making $1 bazillion in business, and I had people kissing my ass, and I mean, it was nice. Like, there's something to be said for success, but it was almost like I started to feel like
indestructible.
Yeah, a little bit immortal.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like we don't have like Greek gods in our culture, but I think we still have gods, like, you know, Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs and your boss. We treat them like gods. And I felt like I could die, and I was like, I want to come back to this mountain because it made me feel small again. And I feel like when, like, the best way a human could ever live is when you like know your place. So when I was on the Appalachian Trail, and especially when we were hiking around Mount Rainier when our kids were younger, I remember always having this thought in my mind, like, oh, we could die.
Yeah.
And you can feel it out there because you see the cliffs, you see the rocks, you see, like, and you hear about bears. And I don't even think it's like probably more dangerous than
definitely not more dangerous
living
than
around here,
driving a car.
But for some reason, because it's so normal here, and we get used to seeing a bunch of people that aren't dying, for some reason it felt more risky. But I don't know. I just want this thing where with you, I feel like you could die any day, and I want to live in that reality, and I want to appreciate you with the time that we have.
Yeah.
And not take it for granted, and not feel like I'm entitled to it either. But when you die, if you die, I don't want to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that ever happened. And like, I mean, I think it'd be like really sad. But I don't think it needs to be like more sad than it already needs to be.
Yeah. Or just, yeah, I think there is life after death. Like, as in, you know, if you died tomorrow, my life wouldn't end, you know, because you died. It would be really hard, but, you know, it's...
Well, and I think we live in a worldview that we believe, like, death is actually not the most powerful thing. We believe life is stronger than death, and love is stronger than death, and God is stronger than death, and the humans, therefore the human soul, because of what God did, is actually stronger than death. So death's not the actual end.
Yeah.
If people don't believe that, I'm not sure really what they believe. I've never really dabbled with those thoughts myself. But either way, we have to face the reality that we're all going to die.
Yeah. Either way.
So the final thing I wanted to mention was this thing the camera guy said. So basically, you have this weird dynamic because you have this guy climbing.
Oh, I think I know you're going to talk. This is interesting.
And then you have these people filming him. And there's like friends, because in order to be a rock climbing filmer, you have to be able to climb some crazy ass rock yourself.
Yeah.
So these guys have climbed together for like 10, 20 years, some of them. But then filming, a lot of these guys at free solo, they actually do it alone because the added pressure of someone else watching is just too much.
Yeah.
And you need to have a clear mind and be able to make decisions. So not only is he doing the tallest mountain in the world, he's doing it in front of people for the first time in his life. He's never climbed in front of people. Normally he doesn't even tell, he just like takes off. And his mom says he never tells me when he does it.
Yeah, he doesn't want to tell. Yeah.
So anyways, one of these cameramen, they said they're interviewing this cameraman the whole time, and they're like, these cameramen are just like stressing out because they're filming this guy. And it was like, my palms are sweating watching this on a screen. I can't imagine watching it live.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm tied in a rope, and homeboy over there is like not.
Right.
But he says this thing, he said, you know, we had to come to grips with feeling okay about filming this no matter how it turned out.
Yeah, with being okay with the worst possible outcome. Like, being okay in the sense of, you know, this was still worth it to us. Which kind of reminded me of the Appalachian Trail because, you know, we had people asking us, well, what if your child dies in the cold or, you know, whatever. And I think we had to grapple with that and say, you know, would we be okay? Would we be able to live with ourselves if this happened?
I first thought about like those types of thoughts when I was like 10 years ago when I was hiking around Mount Rainier.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, if my kid dies doing this completely optional activity,
yeah,
am I gonna react by saying, dang it, I knew it, or I should have known better. We're never going to hike again. That was stupid, you know, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's like pretty reactionary response to death. Because you have to make sense of this tragedy. And I think a lot of times people react in some crazy way. Like, you know, their kid dies of cancer and they spend the rest of their life like starting a cancer foundation just to cope with it. And I've never dealt with anything like this, so I don't want to like make light of that. But people are always trying to make sense of it. So they might say like, oh, like an alcoholic hit my kid, so like I'm never drinking alcohol again, or we went outside and we're rafting and my kid died, so I'll never raft again, or that was so dumb, I shouldn't have rafted. You know, they kind of make a backwards conclusion about the activity just because of the result.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling like that's a terrible way to live. And I actually learned that from blackjack, which is like you have to play the game well, and you actually have to let go of the result. Because when you play the game mathematically well, sometimes you would walk out of a casino losing.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. You have to congratulate yourself based upon how you played, not the result. And in the long run, playing the game well will result in a good result, but it doesn't always. So for us, like with these decisions, we want to have adventure and learning and growth and intimacy. And we're going to do whatever we think is best for that.
Yeah.
And sometimes shit's going to happen. You know, a kid might break a leg or get an eye infection or even die. You know, that could happen. But when that happens, I think it would be errant to say, to toss it all out.
Yeah.
Or to beat ourselves up. You know,
Right.
not to say you're not going to learn and own up to bad decisions. But just because, I guess what I'm saying is, just because of the result doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad decision.
Right.
It's so much easier. Everyone's looking for someone to blame at that point. And even blaming yourself is easy.
I think it's a way, how do you deal with grief, you know? I think, you know, to actually deal with it, you have to like start soul searching, and some people just choose to like deal with more of the surface stuff.
But I think a lot of people go their entire life, trying to prevent that scenario from ever happening.
Yeah.
Because if someone, gets sick or gets hit by a car or whatever, then they're going to feel like an idiot or a bad parent because of something happened. And if you sit at home and let your kid play on an iPad all day for 18 years, it's not good for them, but no one will criticize you for it, really.
Yeah.
But if you let your kid go biking down the street without a helmet on their own, which has some risk involved in it, and the kid dies, people be like, "You're an idiot."
Right.
How could you do that? Or at least that's how it feels.
Yeah, and I think people tend to put themselves in the position of God in those scenarios and think, I don't know, when you blame yourself for someone dying, if you didn't actually murder them, then in a way you are kind of playing God, as if you had that power, to, I don't know. So.
Well, there's a cost on both sides, and I think we are really good at evaluating the cost, humans, of what will feel the most.
Whatever the worst possible scenario is, like
socially or culturally.
Right.
Insurance works this way. At Apple, when you buy an iPod or an iPhone or a laptop or something, they always try and sell you AppleCare. And the way they do it is they tell you these stories of these people that, they didn't have AppleCare, and they walk out of the store and they drop their laptop, and they feel like an idiot because they're like, you could have just paid this $175. You wouldn't have to worry about that.
They don't tell the stories about the people that have had the laptops for years and years and never ever use their insurance.
Yeah, for every one of those, there's got to be 20 or 30 mathematically. They're not offering a public service here. That's how insurance works. It's a bad bet. We learned this in blackjack.
But you don't want to be that person.
But you don't feel that type of pain when you pay the $175. Like the pain kind of goes away. It's small and it's like little chunks. That's how insurance works. But you always avoid the one big hit.
Yeah.
And that's what we structure our lives, I think, around that one big hit, which is the whole like people saying, "I told you so,"
right?
Or thinking we're an idiot.
It would be interesting. Like, what would you do? What would you do if you were the only family, or like there wasn't any other humans around? Whatever your answer is to that probably shows you how much other people's opinions really are influencing your decisions.
Okay, so I think this is where I think I'm kind of like Alex Hannold, because I think my how they talked about how his brain's kind of busted or whatever.
They didn't say it was busted, but it's different. Like there's whatever that fear control center is, medulla, whatever. His is less active. So it takes like a lot of hits to activate it.
I don't think that's my thing per se.
No,
because I feel risk, but
it would be interesting to analyze.
But social pressure. So I'll never forget this story. So I'm doing this STP, Seattle to Portland bike ride. It's 200 miles. I think this particular time I was doing 2 days, so it's 100 miles a day. And I'm like, I'm not gonna wear a helmet. I mean,
yeah,
because you're biking with literally 9,000 other bikers.
Yeah.
So you're not. I mean,
you're probably gonna run into one of them more.
Yeah, you're not gonna be like hit by a car unless he's wiping out 20 of us at a time.
Yeah.
And that's the main reason why I'd wear a helmet, is getting hit by a car. So I didn't wear a helmet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, out of 9,000 bikers, there's going to be some other people not wearing helmets. Wrong. So I'm not wearing my helmet. And literally every single person I saw, 9,000 people, I didn't see all 9,000 of them, but everyone's wearing a helmet.
Yeah.
Except for, at about mile 50, there was one person not wearing a helmet. Do you know who it was?
Your brother. Well, and our two little kids in the trailer too.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
But that's crazy to me. That like
you were able,
when you do the math, 9,000 people, like if you were just to assess the risk and figure out how much money was spent on helmets.
Most people could not turn whatever part of that social pressure, or I think it's mostly social pressure than safety, off. like you and your brother were able to do that somehow.
I don't know.
And I remember you overheard someone like shaming you, or maybe they were just talking about
I do kinda
you,
remember that.
and you like somehow heard about it. But anyways,
So, do you have anything else you want to say about this documentary? I really appreciate it. It is beautiful.
yeah,
I have never seen filmography like this.
Yeah.
I mean, the quality, but just the perspective, looking down a 3,000-foot wall, it's really weird. You know, you have this planet Earth stuff that's shot in helicopters and crazy macro zoom, and it's beautiful too. This is different beautiful. I've never seen anything like this.
it's like more nitty gritty, beautiful.
And then you have this like human interest aspect, and then the social danger aspect. Really fascinating. I feel like it really brought me in touch with these questions of death for an hour and a half, which I think is a really valuable thing to assess. And I'm really glad we took our kids to it and talked about it. It was like, there's our homeschooling for the month.
Yay. Yep.
So I really would recommend it. I don't know if it's going to be out in theaters at all, but it's called Free Solo.
You mean you don't think it's
By the time
oh yeah,
it's in like select theaters, but so if you can see it in a theater, like I wanted to see it in a theater because like seeing these walls in this, it's like it's so cool. But maybe it's out on video, so I do strongly recommend it.
I recommend it. Yeah, it was really cool. Well done.
All right. That's it. We're not going to do... We're at our time limit, so we're not going to do any, like, news or phone calls. And plus, we don't have any phone calls anyway, so leave a message. Oh, yeah, we have our announcements that I'm supposed to do every week. This podcast is available on all sorts of platforms. You can find them at anchor.com/fightfortogether or something like that. Links are all below. Like it's on iTunes and Google and all that kind of stuff. And we don't make any money, but we spend money on cigars
and tea.
So if you would like to fund us, you're welcome to do so, but not under any obligation whatsoever. We love being able to offer this completely free and uninhibited by any type of pressure from needing to get money from any sponsors or anyone at this point in time.
Yep.
And we also have like a Facebook group where it's private, but we want to be able to open up discussion for these particular topics if you guys are interested in that. So that link is also in the podcast description. Is there anything else?
Nope.
Cool, guys.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks for listening.
Yep.
This week.
Thank you for listening to Fight for Together. We'll see you next time.
Dang it, I didn't mean to do the drama.